This is the calm before the storm here in Logan City. We had some rain overnight, but obviously people are bracing for some very, very heavy weather over the course of the next couple of days, whether it's here in Logan or right throughout southeast Queensland and into northern New South Wales. We're preparing for the worst but hoping for the best. There is a lot of stress and anxiety. People are obviously very concerned and very worried about what the next couple of days might bring.
Have you had any briefings overnight, Treasurer? And which areas in particular are you most concerned about as that system tracks towards the coastline?
I have had some briefings overnight, but there'll be one a little bit later this morning as well. I think the main conclusion of the updated advice is that we expect the cyclone to cross a little bit later, more like Friday in the day rather than overnight, Thursday, Friday. And so my advice to people is to make the most of that time. If you haven't already cleaned up the yard and secured things in your yard, brought the bins in, done all of those sorts of things, also make sure that you've got everything sorted in terms of being able to make an insurance claim. Also make sure that your MyGov details and logins are sorted as well in case you need to access the sorts of payments that usually kick in after natural disasters. There's a lot of people in harm's way here. You know, we're talking about something like 4.5 million Australians potentially in harm's way, 1.8 million homes. And we expect that there'll be billions of dollars of damage done by Cyclone Alfred. And so the best thing we can do is prepare and stay informed, make sure that people are accessing all of the relevant information and getting it from trusted sources. But it's going to be a difficult couple of days.
Yeah, look, it is. Look, we're also obviously so worried about vulnerable communities, especially after what we saw happen 3 years ago in those devastating floods around northern New South Wales. Could you talk to us about what's needed and what's been put into place to support people with illness or who are homeless, First Nations communities, multicultural communities who might be more vulnerable in this kind of situation as this cyclone comes towards the coast?
Yeah, I mean, I know from my own community here in Logan that it's often the most vulnerable people who are most at risk. I know from the sorts of houses and neighbourhoods that went under the last couple of times that they're the ones that we're worried about again. There's a coordination mechanism which is particularly attentive to vulnerable people, people with a disability, people with other kinds of vulnerability. And from a personal point of view, I think a lot of local representatives are making calls, particularly to older constituents and residents, to make sure that if they need help, they can provide help. And here they can be provided with help. And here I want to really shout out the SES, all of the volunteers, all the community organisations, all the first responders. You know, we know that this is going to be very, very difficult for everyone in harm's way, but especially for the most vulnerable. And so they need and deserve a bit of extra attention. And as I understand it, people are getting that.
The PM says the Defence Force stands ready to help the SES there in Queensland and also in New South Wales. How are they likely to be used, and what lessons could you learn from previous disasters when after the disaster, that's when the real tragedy starts to set in, when people felt abandoned or weren't able to be rescued? Are there some lessons that have been learnt from previous years?
Of course, you know, unfortunately, Queenslanders and Australians more broadly are no strangers to natural disasters. It's rare for a cyclone to be this far south and to threaten such a huge population area, but we do learn from previous natural disasters. We are very grateful to the Australian Defence Force for being in position to be ready to help where that's necessary. That's a good demonstration, really, of all three levels of government working closely together. But you made a good point in your question, Bridget, and that is to recognise that as hard as the next few days will be, the heavy rain, the heavy winds, it's often the period in the immediate aftermath where we see that flooding, where we see people dealing with the damage and the aftermath. And so, yeah, I really want to reassure people that we know that as difficult as the next few days will be, it will be weeks and months in order to clean up after what we are anticipating. And so Australians are usually there for each other when times are tough, and the government will be there for them as well. And I think our commitment by the Defence Force to help out where they can is part of that.